Ritika, thank you for coming back. We're very excited that you are visiting us in Vancouver and you're joining us again. For those who don't know, Ritika is our student of the month, or she was our student of the month for January 2024. And she's agreed to come back and continue the conversation because it was so interesting. We wanted to learn more about you. So welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back. I'm just here for 2 weeks, so I wanted to kind of make sure we make the full use of this opportunity. So, yeah, I was like, why not? And I'm happy that the time, worked out for the two of us. Yeah.
Yes, we were very happy when we received your message that you're visiting us again. I wish the weather was better.
Yes.
But it's okay. Hopefully you'll pick up before you go.
Yeah.
So, Ritika, we learned so much about you last time with the article that our writer Nacho wrote about your career, your achievements. I would like this to be a continuation of that article.
Yeah.
But I want to get us started by knowing more about you.
Yeah.
Your background. For example, you were born and raised in Pune?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, tell us more about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I was born and raised in Pune, as you mentioned. And, I grew up in a family where it was quite of a non-traditional family. Like, I've had a very interesting beginning for myself because I remember, despite my parents, my relatives and everyone in general was never really supportive of the idea of, like having a girl child and, all of that. And we know that there's... in India, at least very long ago, people had this perception that having a girl child isn't like a great thing to do because she's a liability and not an asset. Because, they're always married away in a way, right? So I remember my parents told me the first time when I was born, no one was really happy despite my parents because they were like, oh my God, you're going to get married off and, all your... thing is going to go waste, right? And I remember when it even came to conversations around sending me abroad, helping me pursue higher education, there were a lot of questioning around it because they were like, you'd rather invest this money into her marriage, right? And send her off to a husband than investing in her because she doesn't have a future, right? She's a woman. But I remember, like, I'm grateful really for the parents I have. So I think because of all of those contexts, I have been brought up in a setting where I was very early on told that maybe my gender dictated who I was. And that's why from a very young age, I was very passionate about, in a way, initially proving people wrong about that. And that's why, I used to go above and beyond my way to act like the boy of the family, right? So when my dad used to fix the car, I used to go help him, where they'd be, the classic traditional tasks. But as I kept growing up, I realized, wait a second, being doing things that boys do traditionally doesn't mean you have to act like a boy. A woman can also do that, right? And I think that's when I really embraced being a woman and a girl and realized how it's actually such an asset to be one. And, I realized the resilience, the strength I have. And, ever since then, it's been upwards. And so, yeah, it was quite a lot of those beginnings. And I think it really helped me in many ways become the person I am today. Because, yeah, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those experiences.
I can relate. I can relate to being a woman or a girl in a very masculine culture and having to compensate by going the extra mile. You know what? I'm a girl, so I need to prove it. I need to get this degree, and then I need to get the next degree, and then I'm gonna play basketball better than anyone. I'm gonna play volleyball better than anyone. And hey, why stop at games? I'm gonna move towards also video games.
Yeah.
So I felt I was compensating, and now I'm more comfortable just being a woman, and I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Being here in Canada, where it's okay. Yeah, I can exist. I don't have to prove that I should exist.
Exactly. And I think you being a woman in the first place, doing all the things you're doing, I think if men don't have to prove something, neither do you. Right? I think that's the idea. And I think each one of us are just so unique in terms of the strengths we bring to the table. And I think there's nothing masculine or feminine about those strengths. So I think that was the major thing kind of like I took away through my upbringing and even the culture back in India, because I realized it's not even people's fault. It's something that they have experienced when they were kids, right? So I think I realized to be more empathetic as well and realize where they're coming from, but take away what matters to me the most, right?
Yes.
As they say, everyone's going to have advice. You don't need to take it from everyone.
Yes.
And you pick up only what applies to you,
Of
right?
course,
Yeah.
So You said it wasn't a traditional family. So what was your day to day in Pune? Like, what was Ritika up to when she was a teenager?
I mean, not a traditional family because for a lot of the audiences who may be from South Asia as well, a lot of the parents there are so concerned about academics, right? You will see kids Monday to evening, like, morning to evening, be occupied in classes back to back. Once they're back, they have tuitions, etc., and so much more. Just because in India, there's this perception that if you have a 95% and above, you're the smartest kid, you're going to be successful in life. But I think I've been fortunate to have parents who never saw that idea. They were never really stuck up to that. They were more open-minded. My mom's idea since I was young, every day, she used to ask me this question. She's like, Ritika, what impact did you create today? And when I was younger, I used to be like, what do you mean, Mom? Like, impact? Like, I'm not like a big person that I can, help so many people. But I think now that I look back, what she was really trying to instill in me is just this idea of helping people. And she meant it's not about the quantity, right? Even if you give a compliment to someone one day or you help someone cross the road, that is you creating an impact on someone. So I think unlike telling me, oh, study, 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 she was more about make sure you're creating an impact no matter what you do and just pass your classes, right? I think she was just concerned with that. And she really gave me the space to figure out who I wanted to be, never telling me because of my gender or anything I should be doing certain things. And so I think that way I was fairly lucky. Like, how kids in India, like, even if they want to go for sleepovers or they want to travel abroad by themselves, I did my first trip abroad alone at the age of 10. And not a lot of people back home, their parents don't really allow them to do that, especially for girls, right? Because they're like, oh yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, this and that. And I think that way my family was always non-traditional. And that's why many people saw me as like as if me and my sister were the boys of the family, because they treated us as, how boys are usually treated in India, like no one really controlling where they go and everything. So
the independence that man gets just automatically. Yeah. Again, I can relate. Oh my God. Yes, I also left home very early. Left when I was 16, went to study abroad. My brother was there for a while, helped me settle and everything, but it was also not traditional because it was not that common for parents, Yemeni parents, to send their daughters to study abroad. But my mom was such a believer in education, and she was a believer in me gaining that education so I can help myself in the future and not have to rely on anyone. So she was always supportive of me, and she pushed me to do my best, and I'm very grateful to that because I'm happy where I am.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's anything.
So what prompted coming to Canada to study? And I think you came also at a very young age.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, honestly, coming to Canada was a very, I went with the flow in a way. I think I never really initially wanted to come to Canada, actually. It was my parents who really urged me to. And I think a big part of it was because, when I was in school back home in India, because of the kind of surroundings I was born and brought up in, as I kind of hinted towards before, I grew up being a very shy person. Right? I used to always be someone, whoever went to events, I used to be the last person in the room sitting on the last desk so that no one saw them. I used to always wear a hoodie with my hood on so that no one, saw me or felt my presence, because I think for the longest time I internalized being a woman negatively, right? Because I always felt like as if I wasn't adding value no matter what room I entered into. And I just didn't want to exist in a way. But I think, and my mom, I think, started noticing how that was having a huge impact on my mental health and, on so many other things. And she felt she wanted me to be in a space where I was by myself to figure it out, with no one else around me to tell me, hey, this is who you are, this is your capability, blah, 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 right? And I think that's why, even though it was so difficult for her to do it, right, because I'm very close to my mom, I mean, most of us are, but, I was one of those kids who couldn't stay without her even for a day. But she knew it was the right thing to do for me. So I think that's when we decided, let's move abroad. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. We'll take the risk and we'll grow. as human beings. And I remember I'm a pretty chill person that way, whereby when it came time to choose the university to go to, I literally went on Google and I typed like best country to study kinesiology in the world. And it said Canada as the first place. I was like, great, we're going to Canada. And then I typed another search saying best university in Canada to study kinesiology, and it said UBC. So I decided to apply to UBC. That was the only university I applied to, which was very stupid of me at that point, if I think about it. But I was fortunate enough to get into UBC, got a scholarship as well for the first year. And then I was on my way here.
How was studying UBC?
Now, this is a very interesting topic because if you already know a little bit of this context, but I studied kinesiology, which is like pre-med, right? But today, everything I do is in business. So for me, if you ask, my degree, I think, is not what mattered too much, but I think it was the experience of being at UBC. It was the experiences, the network, the opportunities that being at UBC offered me that I think played more of a bigger role than the academia, quite honestly, right? And I think because from my perspective, education back home in India is actually a lot more tougher and everything, because what I was studying here in my third year of university, I had studied that in my 10th grade back home. So for me, classes were just it was something I'd already done. So a lot of my value honestly came from the experiences, which I think was incredible because it's such a big institution. We have such amazing alumni as well. So I think getting access to those networks and opportunities every single day, honestly, because it's such a big university, was the most life-changing thing I could have asked for, right? And I think those experiences helped me realize the importance of things like networking, branding, and so much more, right? Yeah.
I mean, coming to Canada or traveling abroad to study, yes, you're getting the education, you're getting a good quality of education depending on where you go, but it's also the experience.
100%.
And just 1 year being abroad, from what I've heard from other international students, they have changed. Not necessarily that you have to change to the better. Just you change. Your mind changes. Your mind opens up more. You meet people from different cultures. And you learn more about yourself once you're on your own in another country. So it's really important for you to make sure when you come to Canada to take advantage of that experience, put yourself out there, network, meet people, and of course get good grades. Definitely, that should be your top priority. And then that's how you came to Canada. But how long did you stay in Vancouver?
So I was in Vancouver 4 years. Then I moved so I had the option of staying in Vancouver to do my job, but I wanted to kind of move out of the city because I wanted to kind of again challenge myself. I felt too comfortable in Vancouver because I already had my friends here. My sister had come here as well now. So it just felt too comfortable and I wasn't ready for the comfort yet. I wanted to still keep challenging myself, so decided to move to Halifax, which was a city I'd never been to before. And I was there for a year then. It was an amazing experience, learned a lot. Obviously initially you always struggle in a new city when you're by yourself, and which again pushed me to discover a lot of new things about myself, right? How resilient I am and so much more. But I just felt like I wasn't again at the right place at the right time. In terms of the pace of Halifax, because it's a lot more slower, I would say, compared to the pace I like, at least at this stage of my life, because I feel like I'm young, I want to achieve a lot of things now, and I want to just run, right? Not to do a marathon right now, but like a sprint. And that's when I moved to Toronto about 6 months ago. Yeah.
And you said that Halifax was slower, not the pace you wanted. How would you think it compares to Vancouver? Because a lot of people will also say Vancouver moves a little slow, especially when you come from big cities. So how does it compare?
I feel like Vancouver is between Halifax and Toronto. Halifax is even slower than Vancouver because also about the size of the city, the kind of opportunities available. Like it's also about perspective, because in many ways there could be more opportunities because there are less players in the market in terms of, let's say if you want to start a business or whatever, right? And you have the opportunity to become the major player. But at the same time, like in bigger cities, you also have access to more resources, access to more opportunities, just surely in terms of like networking events that are happening. There is so much happening. in Toronto every single day. But you won't find as much happening in Vancouver, and even lesser happening back in Halifax. So I think that's kind of the, range, I would say. So it's Toronto, Vancouver, and then Halifax in terms of the speed and of life and everything. Even the pace at which people walk is very different. Honestly, when I walk to work in Halifax, it's like, taking your time. Vancouver a little bit faster. Oh, Toronto, I feel like we all are sprinting to work. It's almost like we're running, but still walking, It's, you feel it.
You're on the go.
Exactly. You're definitely on the go. Yeah. In Toronto, even in the office, I hardly see people sit down and have lunch together in the lunch areas. But in Vancouver, I noticed the difference where people during lunchtime take out an hour, sit together, and I was shocked. I was like, don't you guys have work? But then I think it's just the cultural difference, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In Vancouver, the culture overall, they value a good balance.
Yes.
And you would see people, they would take like a week off in the summer,
Exactly.
go camping, and a week off in the winter where they're going skiing. So it's more chill here.
Yeah.
Definitely kind of like getting used to it and getting too comfortable and with the chill life. So when I would go to Toronto, I'm like, oh my God, so like where are the trees? Like I want to see plants. Why are people just like on the go?
Yeah.
So you get addicted to that relaxed life. But I'm also sensing that you are very comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah. With which comfort?
Discomfort.
Yes. Oh, yes. I love discomfort. Because I feel like from a very young age, my mom kind of like feeded this in my head that, like when you're too comfortable, I think we tend to not push ourselves, right? Like, when you have your family, like even when I was back home, right, you just feel so satisfied and so happy with where you're at that you don't want to move as fast, right? Which I think is also amazing. But I think just depending on the stage of life I'm at and, the fact that I've made the move so many miles away, sacrifice that time with my parents, which I could have spent because, you never know how long they're going to live, unfortunately. And, you want to make most of that time, but you still spend that time away because, you're here trying to build something you maybe could not build back home, right? So I think because you have sacrificed so much to be here today, it just feels like it's not right on my part to use this time to just live that comfortable life moving forward, right? So I feel like I'd rather go through the discomfort today to live the comfort later on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're talking about sacrifices.
Yeah.
Sacrificing that time with your mom, with your dad, sacrificing time with your sister.
Yeah.
Sacrificing comfort to level because I would imagine it gets a little challenging in time. Did it get challenging that this desire, this passion for achieving, for being on the go, for making the most out of your time?
No, 100%. The first year when I arrived to Canada, right? I think the moment you arrive, you're struck with the first challenge of finances, right? From the time you buy that Starbucks coffee at the airport, you realize how expensive things are. As soon as you start converting things, you're like, wait a second, that was just 2,000 rupees, right? People there sometimes earn that in 2 weeks, right? Like, so I think when it comes things into that perspective, it already makes you stressed from the first day onwards, right? And I remember even the first part-time job I took up, whether it be at the pizza place or me working as a dishwasher, I used to also work at as a server at events. And I remember I was at a Deloitte event serving drinks as well and everything, right? And in those experiences, it's really interesting because, you're doing it just for the time being, but the people who you may work with around you at that time may not see the potential in you of being something more than just that. And that I think is the biggest challenge, because when you are vulnerable, when you have just made your way here, you don't have people you love around you as many who can, tell you, don't worry about them. You focus on yourself. You need someone to say it to you sometimes, right? But when you don't have those people around you and, when you even come back home after a tough day, especially physical labor, because when you're doing these part-time jobs, it's also scary to come back to an empty house, right? Not having your mom give you a glass of water or make you food, right? You just boiling the Maggi noodles or whatever it is, right? And I think those things can definitely be challenging because you many times lack people who believe in you, right? Or who may tell you constantly, hey, this is what your job is meant to be. And, I have seen thousands of people like you come and do this for ages, right? And I think that can be very demoralizing. So I think those are definitely big challenges that exist. But I think for people who stay persistent, are able to really identify their purpose within Canada and why they came here beyond the PR process, beyond any of that. Because that is definitely not anyone's purpose. It's a part of the purpose, right?
Yes.
Or maybe it's a part of getting to the purpose. So I think once I identified what that overarching purpose was, that I think really helped me put things into context and really prioritize what I wanted to do and what my capabilities are, and not in many ways give a shit about what others thought about me, right? And then that's when the change happened. Yeah.
Change. That's a key word coming to Canada, because you just mentioned you came to Canada. You changed from being very shy. If you know anything about Ritika, you are outspoken and you are an advocate for many people.
Yeah.
Of course, running your own nonprofit, but also you mentioned change, just evolving, coming here, being challenged financially because, of course, but also working, serving at a Deloitte event. And now you are working at Deloitte. It's very interesting, the change and how we evolve being in Canada. It might not seem much, but once we reflect, it's like, yes, this country is a country of change.
Yeah.
Personal, career-wise, professional-wise, it is a place where you change.
Yeah.
But we just mentioned Redefined, and it got me thinking. Since the last time we spoke,
Yes.
You have been very busy.
Tried to be.
You have been on national TV. You've also traveled, and you became the top voice on LinkedIn. That was really, really wonderful to see. We celebrated with you. But what else have you been up to?
So I think there's been a lot going on, honestly, since the time that happened, because I think, as I mentioned already, like, I think the audience may also have got an idea that I'm someone who prefers the faster pace. But I think there's been a lot of learning as well to us as an organization in terms of what we want to prioritize, how we want to move forward. So I think the biggest shift for us has been from a mindset perspective. I think for the longest time, we were a lot kind of like a student-run organization, right? We were just doing back-to-back events. Like, we've done 45 plus events till now with 10,000 plus attendees. So we have done a lot across different cities in Canada. But I think now we're moving to the phase is like, you know what, we want to create longer term impact. I'm not happy with just one event creating one impact at a time, because it can have just so much, right? It may inspire someone for 3 days, but what about 3 weeks, right? Are they coming back to their traditional old habits of again applying to jobs in those ways we were telling them not to do it in, right? So I think with those longer term impacts, our focus is now on creating programs and initiatives that create that long term impact. So we're launching our internship program next month, which is basically a 2 to 3 month program for students who are looking for experiences in consulting, like business development, marketing, right? Where we get them to work in a realistic setting with a real organization that exists today in that particular industry and space. So that by the time they come out of that program, not only do we upskill them with workshops, but we help them build relevant Canadian experiences. Because, you know, that's the biggest challenge. Another one as well is like the lack of perceived effort on the employer side because of the lack of Canadian experiences, right? So us being able to help them develop those and build experiences that are relevant to their industry. What starts happening is, because of our part-time jobs that take up so much of our lives, right? Even though it's an experience, it may not be relevant to what we want to get into. And that's where the gap happens. Because now when it's time to graduate, you're like, wait a second, I have experience, but guess what? It does not apply to what you want to get into. And that's then that dilemma we try solving too, right? So I think that's what we're trying to solve the gap for students. So I think that's one of the things. We have a recognition program as well, which we're hosting an event on April end. So we're basically hoping to recognize international students for the work that they're putting in. I think acknowledgement goes a long way, and it's important, right? Just how I mentioned, you sometimes need someone to pat you on the back and be like, hey, you know what? You've been doing a great job, right? And I think you can become that X person, right? And here's something to show you your potential on who you can become later on, right? And I think that's what we're hoping to do through the recognition program. We have 5 different awards, like, you know, Immigrant Entrepreneur Award, Black Immigrant Award, and so many more, just to recognize immigrants in Canada across different industries who are going above and beyond to create the impact, right? So besides that, we obviously have like a few more events coming up. I was also in India on a speaking tour that I did there. And then I was here in Vancouver as well. I have spoken at 5 institutions till now. I have 3 more coming up this week. So just trying to build my personal career as well in many ways in public speaking and advocacy. And finished one up in Toronto as well, where again we went across 12 institutions, with my team. So yeah, it's been nice. Even in India, we're launching officially now, formally, in terms of this advocacy work that we do. Not for immigrants, obviously, because but for people who may potentially come to Canada as immigrants. So yeah.
So you're inspiring people before they even step out in Canada.
Yeah, because my whole point is that people who want to come to Canada, please come. But I don't want people to think they need to come to Canada to see a change in life, because I think change is dependent on you at the end of the day, right? I've seen people who come to Canada and are successful. Some people who come to Canada are not successful, right? So all that goes to show is the country is not what creates the difference. It's you who creates the difference, right? The country may serve as a medium to make it happen, but it's not the sole determinator, right? And that's what I want to show people is that, hey, through the coaching we give you back home in India as well, you might still be able to see as incredible success as the few stories of success you see here in Canada as well, right? That's my vision, because with the cap on students and so much more happening, right, it leaves so many people disheartened. And I think it's that disheartening is unnecessary, right? Because it's not like if you don't come to Canada, you will be unsuccessful in your life. That's not the reality, right? If you come here, yes, it may help you accelerate success, but doesn't mean you can't do it back home. So I think that's our goal with doing it back home as well.
Incredible. Yes, it's something that you have to think about what fits within your career goals, what fits within your own personality, because there are people who travel abroad, go to study, but it doesn't really fit them because they either want to stay close to family, stay close to the community, or benefit their own community with their talents and their time. So with the cap, you mentioned the cap that's going on right now, and many more changes that are happening in Canada, and now we're hearing something like that is happening in Australia as well. And it can be very negatively perceived from an international student perspective. You would think, one, are we the problem? Two, we're not wanted, we're not liked, we're being blamed for everything that's going wrong in Canada, and that's not the right message. Because if you do choose to come to Canada, and if you do choose to pursue a career in Canada, stay in Canada, get that PR, build your family here, you will bring so much value to this country. Your value is priceless.
100%.
It doesn't matter how much you contribute to the economy. No, your contribution is priceless, and it's not just financially. I recently had a conversation with someone who is an immigrant, but he also mentioned how in the 2 years they've been living here, they've noticed an influx of immigrants. Immigrants coming from countries, people of color. And he voiced that he had a problem with us not assimilating. And that rubbed me the wrong way. Because we come here to contribute. We come here for our career goals. We bring so much. We don't need to assimilate in order for us to exist. It is not something that is Canada's entitled to. So what do you think of that, coming from a strong culture, being a person of color, working a lot with people of color? What do you think of the idea of assimilation in Canada?
I think it's a very interesting concept because I think Canada as a country in itself is called to be a place that's multicultural, right? And when we say multicultural, it's this whole idea where each individual brings their own values that add value to the existing culture within Canada, right? Exactly, yes. And I think it is the different cultures that make up Canada today, quite honestly, if you see, right? 1 in 4 people in Canada today are immigrants. And that number most likely may rise because of the aging population in Canada. So for people who have that issue, well, they better be ready then because it is going to be upwards from here, right? Even though they put a cap in, like obviously a lot of the immigrants who are coming here are having kids here as well, and so much more. So I think that trend is definitely happening if you see statistically. But I think beyond that, I think Canada is a place, like, for anyone, everyone has different perspectives. My own personal experience, when even I came to UBC, right, I found people who were not happy with my existence here. There are people who are going to feel like you're the reason they don't get jobs today. There are people who are going to feel like you're the reason for the housing issues. There are people who are going to feel like you're the reason for everything, right? But I think that's also from, if you also think from a non-immigrant perspective, there are always going to be people who are going to have some issue with you, personally, societal perspective, whatever it is. So my whole point is focus on people who see the value in you, are ready to invest in you. And I think there are a lot of people in Canada who see that value, right? The cap on international students as well, I think it in many ways is not at all, should not be perceived from a negative perspective, because I think it's actually for the betterment of the students themselves, because we are noticing these challenges. Why? Because it's obvious. When you have a country that has limited resources, if you have a lot of people coming in, that's actually not good on our part, because we know we don't have the infrastructure to support them. So I think Canada taking that step to put that cap on students is actually great, because now it ensures the betterment of those who are already here. And Canada is becoming stricter for institutions as well, because what we are realizing is so many agents back home, so many agents that exist in Canada are the reason for students having bad experiences, right? It's not even the institutions themselves, it's the middlemen, right, that exist, right? And I think all of these practices are really helping in many ways get rid of that. That's why if you see, so many colleges have shut down in the last year itself, right? A big reason being because of these implications, because now PGWPs are not being provided to students from every college and university. And that's done for a reason, right?
Yes.
So I think it's wonderful that they're doing this, and because it's technically not helping institutions, because they're losing out money. And I feel like, so all in all to say, I think from a political perspective, what is being done, at least in my perspective, what I've spoken to students about, even though on surface sometimes it may feel like it's not for us, it's not in our, for our betterment, it actually is, if you look at the overall perspective, right? I think sometimes it's difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes and picture the situation. But when you do that, you realize that, okay, it's different. And I think from, for even all the immigrants who are in Canada, I would always say you're always going to find people who are not happy with their existence. And don't give a shit about those people, right? Focus on yourself. When you do good work, there are going to be thousands of others who are going to stand up and, clap for you when you're getting those awards on stages, and there'll be a few who may not stand up. And why care about those when you have 1,000?
Exactly. Right? And yes, the changes and the decisions that are being made, they're pushing and they're forcing for positive change.
Exactly.
And it's our job as advocates for international students to also communicate that don't take it personally, don't internalize these decisions. They are happening because the system might have flaws.
Exactly.
Not you. So with, your event, you wanting to celebrate people, it shows that we are going to be those people that give you the pat on the back. We're going to show you that you are valuable. We're going to remind you that you are valuable. And we're going to counter those people who are not very happy, the haters. Thankfully, we are the cheerleaders are more than the haters. So I think what you're doing on LinkedIn, speaking up, also what you're doing on social media. Follow Ritika on Instagram and LinkedIn, and follow Redefine, because you're always sharing really good pieces. Even for me, I've been here 8 years, even as someone that's graduated many years ago, I still find what you say is like, oh, that's true. Like it applies to me as well. So no matter how long you've been here, these kind of reminders and these kind of advice are very important. So I love seeing your videos on Instagram. You've been more active on Instagram. Your thoughts that you shared with us, maybe after a long day working, but it's very insightful. And I really think that, again, follow Ritika, and because you are truly a supporter and an advocate for international students and immigrants. And I think that is wonderful. But I wanted to, maybe to close on that, so ask if you have any advice that you would like to share with newcomers and international students now?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think I'll share two pieces. One is for people who are not here yet, but planning to come here, because I know before the end of 2024 itself, we have another 250,000 immigrants coming in, right? And by the end of 2025, I think it's 500,000. So since we have a lot more people coming in right now, I would say the first thing is come and prepared. That's all I would say, right? Don't trust on the agents. Don't just trust one relative on when they tell you, hey, Canada is a great place, you're going to get an amazing job when you graduate from a university. None of that is true. It completely depends on you. So I would say the first step for you is just find the right people to connect with, and your LinkedIn would be a great place to start. Right? Don't underestimate the power on LinkedIn, right? Like, and start this process before. Don't think, oh, once I'm in Canada, I will get it started. It's going to be too late then, right? So I think the first step is start becoming aware from your own side by connecting with people firsthand who you may not be related to, because people who you're related to, who are your friends, may not sometimes give you the exact picture. So I think the first step is that. I think the second step would be that once you're here, making sure you really develop the right network around yourself is also incredibly important. We always say your network is your net worth, and it's 100% true. For me also, personally, all the opportunities I've gotten today happen just because of networking, finding the right people to connect to, finding the right organizations to tap into, finding the right resources, right, to leverage as well. Even today, I was talking to a student and she was like, Ritika, I just got a job through networking. And I was like, yes, you're one of those other 10,000 students who are applying networking and personal branding and strategies and realizing how immensely powerful they are, right? So I think really investing in developing that network. And last but not the least, I think making sure that before you come to Canada, or even when you're here, you spend the time to realize what is your purpose in Canada. And don't tell me it's the PR. Don't tell me it's the job, because that is never the purpose. A job may be a part of getting there to that purpose. But I think you deciding what that purpose is before even coming here is that first step. So that when you're here, you aren't distracted by your friends who tell you, hey, do this, not that to get that, right? That agent who will tell you, oh, if you want to get your PR in 3 years, you should not pursue this degree, you should do that degree, right? Because whatever, it'll give you your LMIA afterwards, right? I don't want you to focus on that, because PR is important, yes, but it does not change your life. Quite honestly, at least on my perspective, and a few others, I'm sure who'll agree to that. Find them on LinkedIn. But yeah, so just know that if you don't get your PR, your world is not going to end. But I think what might be difficult is once you've come here, making the effort, coming so far, sacrificing so many things. And even if you get your PR, but now you're someone who you never imagined for yourself to be, that's going to be disheartening. That's going to break you. But not getting a PR won't, trust me, right? And once you have experiences, you go anywhere else in the world. Dubai seems like a great place to me, honestly. If I don't get my PR, that's the next place I'm going.
About zero income tax.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. And I always have this plan that I'm like, you know what, if I don't get my PR, before 6 months, my work permit expires, I'm going to set up a business in Canada, right? Get it legalized here, and then run it from India. So, make money in dollars and spend in INR. Isn't that the dream life, right? I'm going to live a rich life back home, right? With that same money that would make me poor in Canada. So, yeah.
And you're still making a change.
Exactly.
You're still making an impact.
Exactly, right? And then I can always come back to Canada later on if I want.
Yeah. That's incredible. I keep saying that word, but it is truly incredible. And I can't wait to see what else you're going to be up to. I would love to, the next time you visit Vancouver, to get an update. And I have a feeling you're going to be doing a lot of things.
Hopefully.
Yes. No, Ritika, you are an amazing person, very inspiring. And I, again, urge people to follow your journey and learn from what you're doing. Attend your events, attend Thrivve events too.
Yes.
And just continue supporting each other and pushing each other. Again, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us.
I know, thank you for having me. And one thing I would also say is, I mentioned this in my post today as well, is I feel like one of us is not enough, right? And no single organization is enough. I think it's time we all come together to help one another, because I think that's the only way we can help everyone, right? Let's say if we even individually cater to 30,000 students, that's not enough. We cater to 50,000 students, that's not enough. That's 1.5 million of us in this country, right? And to cater to all of those people, we all need to come together.
Yeah. We're building that support system. We're building that ecosystem that's for newcomers and international students. And, you know, we're trying to make as biggest of an impact as possible.
100%.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ritika.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
1, 2,